My essential question was, how do Asians and Asian Americans, bound by traditions or cultural misunderstandings, overcome the odds to build a new life? I chose this because I didn't know a lot about Asian literature, and I thought that the explanations provided in the Norton text were really intriguing. And I did a little bit more research, and I decided that I wanted to stick with this culture. One of the books that I did read for this assignment, called Homeless Bird, is a real sweet novel for middle school students who are my audience. And it has a main character very similar to Parvana in The Breadwinner and Omakayas in The Birch Bark House. So I think reading it will also strike a chord on many levels with middle school students, and it will help them see how very fortunate they are to live in the United States. All right, the three books that I chose for the project are Dragon Wings by Lawrence Yep, Single Shard by Linda Sue Park, and Homeless Bird by Gloria Whalen. Many of you might be familiar with Dragon Wings. It's a story about a Chinese boy and his father who live in San Francisco, and it also explores prejudices not only coming from white Americans to Chinese Americans, but vice versa. It's a very authentic text, and it's an adventure story that will appeal to middle school students, as well as providing many opportunities to develop critical literacy. The setting for A Single Shard is the 12th century in Korea. It involves a young homeless boy who wants to become an apprentice to a potter, but he can't because custom dictates that only sons of fathers who are potters can become apprentices. Um, Students, believe it or not, will not have a problem, I don't think, with the time difference between the 10th or the 12th century and the 21st. Um, the conflicts and the themes explored in this novel are timeless, and they involve homelessness and alienation and human kindness and human cruelty and persevering against impossible odds. So I think these are all relevant ideas for students, and they're appealing to students as well. Homeless Bird is a story of an arranged marriage and what happens to the girl who's forced into this situation and after her husband dies. So it's another very touching, poignant tale that's historically and culturally accurate, and again also explores and helps develop critical literacy. I tried to weave these texts together based on the depictions of young Asians whose strife is caused through either their own culture's traditions or by the misunderstandings that they feel towards other cultures. And they also show how main characters overcome impossible odds to build either a new or a better life, and also come to understandings about their self or their culture or life in general. Um, to help students understand the traditions, beliefs, and values of the Chinese, Korean, and Indian cultures is one of the goals of instructions, as well as to show students how obedience to traditions and customs affects people's life, as well as prejudices within and between cultures. And then there are realistic depictions of Asians in different countries in Asia, who persevere to achieve a better life. These texts could be used in 6th, 7th, or 8th grade, but I'm going to focus on 8th grade. And these would be used in a classroom dominated by white American students, but also including African, Hispanic, and Asian Americans, and then special education and English language learners. And these activities and readings would cover about 4 weeks. There are quite a few interdisciplinary connections that I tried to make, keeping in mind what are students doing in 8th grade in those different content areas. So what I tried to do was, for a geography connection, is using maps to identify relationship between China and San Francisco, for example, and also to follow the journey that one of the characters in A Single Shard had to take. Also, science connections, charting seasonal weather conditions in India which add to the suffering of the main character and Homesick Bird. Students will also, for art connections, compare pottery from, this is also a history connection as well, Chinese pottery from the 12th century to contemporary pottery, which they make in their art classes. And they'll also draw a quilt to help them illustrate memories with their families. Social studies and history connections involve researching arranged marriages in India and comparing them to our marriage policies here in America, as well as researching apprenticeships that they'll be reading about in a single shard. As far as activities for Dragon Wings, before reading, students will journal write about Chinatown communities in different cities in the United States and explore why they exist, how they are beneficial to Chinese Americans, and how Chinese Americans might feel about visitors who come in. During reading, they'll create a character chart to help them um, organize all the different characters. There's a lot of different quote unquote Chinese, funny Chinese names of characters. So I think it's important that kids keep track of who's who, what their character traits and their actions, and also kind of keep a list of examples of how prejudice is manifested between the groups. After reading, they'll create a storyboard similar to what we did for the island on Bird Street, which I thought was very effective. They'll show how the Chinese Americans prejudices toward white Americans changed throughout the novel. And then they'll also write about how what the characters are doing after the novel ends. So kind of an extension after they read. For a single shard before reading, they'll do an internet search. It's important for them to understand what apprenticeships are and what they used to be. During reading, they'll talk about obstacles that the main characters have to overcome and the traditions that kind of impact what happens to the characters. They'll also, after they read, again, another art connection, draw some symbols and phrases from the novel that would kind of extend their understanding and express what they learned from the novel. And again, another journal reading or a journal writing example, connecting what they learned about apprenticeships from the beginning to after reading the novel and learning more about what an apprenticeship is. And then for Homeless Bird, again, beginning with a journal writing where they imagine what it would be like to live in a quote-unquote family where no one wanted you. Similar to what the main character did, there'll be group discussions during reading about traditions in India that, to a Western eye, are very oppressive to females. They'll try to explore what makes the main character strong and likable. And then they'll also work together with a partner to help define some of the Indian words. There's a lot of Indian words. And they can use, most of them can be figured out using context, but sometimes they might have to go to an additional source to find the meaning. And then after reading, they can write a letter from the main character to her family. This is something she would never be able to do based on her culture's traditions, but we're rule breakers here, and we're going to have her write a letter, let her family know by the end of the novel that she's okay. Also, they'll create a quilt that will help them make a connection to how they feel about their own families and compare that to how the main character felt about hers, especially in her quilt making. A lot of the things that I learned, I really enjoyed this project. I liked exploring the different texts, and I liked trying to come up with a theme. As difficult as it was, I was tweaking my essential question up until the very end. There were so many books that I wanted to include in the text set too that I had a difficult time narrowing that down. I liked being able to tailor the text to middle school instead of having to use a different grade. Um, Also, a little bit challenging was coming up with interdisciplinary connections that I would, excuse me, that would fit into the time frame, and also yeah, that would fit into the time frame. I think if in the real world, when I have a little bit more time to work with this, I'll be able to come up with some even better and in-depth connections. And I can see myself doing this to help students not only learn about cultures, but also explore universal themes among all the different cultures. I think it helps students see how, yes, how different we are, but there's so many similarities that unite us.